Okie dokie. All right. So here we go. I think you know me. I'm Jeff Carverisky, and we are going to learn a little bit about the iPad and the iPhone. So, this is me. This is not very interesting stuff. The last line is important. If you've been in my classes before, just make a note of that if you haven't, of that email address at the bottom, Jeff_Carverisky@earthlink.net. And after the class, I will be happy to send you copies of the slides, of these very slides that we're looking at, and you can print them out and use them for yourself. Okay, so yeah, let's start thinking about the iPhone. So I'll start right at the very beginning with something that most people don't even think about, and that's this thing called iOS, small I, capital OS. And what is it? And you'll see it related to your iPad or your iPhone, and it really stands. I is for Apple. Everything Apple has starts with a little I. I don't know what the little I stands for. It might be internet, I'm not sure. But OS means operating system. That's a very old term. It dates back to the mainframe days in the 1960s and the 70s. IBM came up with the term. And the operating system is just that piece of software. It's a massive app, very complex app, but it's still just a piece of software, an app that runs your computer. It's kind of like the engine in your car. And without the engine, your car is just a big piece of metal. Without the operating system, your iPhone or your iPad is basically a paperweight. It doesn't actually do anything. So what we need to know is very little about iOS, but it's good to know that it's there, and it's good to know when you need it. So mostly it kind of sits in the background. It's exactly like your engine of your car. The only time you ever worry about the engine in your car is if you turn on the car and it doesn't do anything. The engine doesn't work, right? Or it dies on you. That's when it's time to call a mechanic, right, and take it to the repair shop. So that's pretty much how iOS is. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, because there are some occasional times when you need it, and then you can fix things in your computer when things suddenly stop working or don't work properly, or you can change things to make the phone or the tablet work the way you want. So first of all, let's look at the iPhone, the iPad. So really, I say to everybody when I show them my iPhone or my iPad, what is this? And people say, particularly with the iPhone, oh, well, it's a phone. Well, actually, it's not really a phone. Your iPhone can do 1,000 different things, only one of which is making phone calls. So it doesn't seem to make much sense to call it specifically a phone when it can do all kinds of other things. In fact, as it says on the slide here, it's a very powerful computer that just fits in your purse or your pocket. And it's certainly more powerful and much more capable than the so-called mainframe computers of the 1970s and the 80s and the 90s, which took up entire rooms and cost millions of dollars. Here you have a little thing that fits in your purse or in your pocket, and it costs less than $1,000. They started at a few $100s, but they pushed the price up now over $900. But still, if you think about what it can do compared to a computer that used to cost millions of dollars, it's pretty amazing. And when the iPhone came out in 2007, so it's only been around 13 years, it was the first smartphone, the phone without a keypad. That's why it was called smart. It was intelligent. It could kind of figure out what you wanted to do without you having to type in complicated instruction, which is the way all computers had been up until that time. And even the phones until that time, if you remember the flip phones, you had a little keyboard. Basically, all you could do was type in the numbers, 404, whatever, and make a phone call, or you could use it very clumsily to send text messages. Remember using the letters on the keypad, and it was really a slow and messy business. So the genius of Apple, of Steve Jobs in Apple, was to come out with a phone that didn't have a keypad, right? Then in 2010, which is only 10 years ago, they released the iPad, and that was essentially an iPhone with a bigger screen, right? Except that the iPad wasn't designed to make phone calls. They felt that, carrying this big iPad on your shoulder was a bit like a boombox. You remember the boomboxes of the 1970s and the 60s. You didn't want to have a boombox on your shoulder while you're trying to make a phone call. So it's not really designed to make calls, but we'll talk more about that later on. So really the question that I address here, because everybody asks me, is what is the difference? So here you can see the hand is holding an iPhone. Next to it in white with a white outlay is the iPad. And then down at the bottom is the laptop computer. That's an iMac. It's an Apple iMac computer. But really, to my mind today, they're all pretty much the same. And I call that the Starbucks difference. Because when you buy Starbucks coffee, they give it to you in small, medium, and large, or venti, or whatever the heck they call it. But it's basically small, medium, and large. And essentially, what's the difference between the coffee in the small cup or the coffee in the big cup? Exactly the same. It's just the size of the cup that's different, or how much coffee you're getting. Here, they're all pretty much exactly the same. In fact, the operating system, iOS, that's in the phone and the iPad is exactly the same as far as you're concerned. It may be different under the hood, just like one car's got a different engine to another car, but you still drive the car in exactly the same way. You change the gears, you turn the wheel right to go right and left to go left. The pedals are the same and so forth. So it's exactly the same here. So if you can use an iPhone, you can use an iPad and vice versa. The only real difference is really what you want to do with the device or how much you want to spend. And so basically the phone is good for making calls and doing things like texting and sending emails. And of course, what the kids do all the time, play games. The iPad's a little bigger and it's great for watching movies, reading books and so forth, right? A slightly bigger screen. Although I've certainly seen people on the plane with an iPhone propped up in front of them watching football games or something like that, or playing games. And then the laptop, the big one, is really for productive work. So it's got a built-in keyboard. You don't have to use the on-screen keyboard, which is a bit frustrating and quite slow. It's got a real keyboard and it's much bigger. It's got a much bigger screen and it's really designed for productive work, pretty much used in companies, or if you want to, do a lot of typing, you want to write a novel, you want to write a book, you want to do spreadsheets and so on. But basically they can all do exactly the same. So there's nothing stopping you doing a spreadsheet on the iPhone. It's just that the screen's a little bit small. But the most important, interesting thing between or among these three devices is that they can all be synchronized with the same data. And that's pretty impressive. So I'll give you an example. I might go to my laptop and call up my Kindle app. Kindle is an app produced by Amazon, and it's designed for reading electronic books. So you can buy a book from Amazon, and it's downloaded to your device, your computer or your phone or whatever, instantly. So instead of having to, as we had to do in the old days, drive to Barnes and Noble, go look at all the books there, buy a book, give them the credit card, bring it home and so on. Yeah, you can do it online to Amazon and have the book downloaded in seconds. So I can read that book with the Kindle app on my laptop. I can then go to my phone or my iPad and call up the Kindle app, the same app, and it will instantly open up to exactly the same book that I was reading on my computer at the same page, which is quite remarkable if you think about it. In other words, here we've got completely different devices and they're able to talk to each other, and we'll learn how that is done a little later. One might think, is my iPhone talking to my laptop? Was my iPad talking to my iPhone? And the answer is no, they're not talking to each other. But yet still, with the clever modern technology we've got, they're actually synchronized with exactly the same data. You can look at your pictures of your kids or your family or your last vacation, and you can look at it on your phone, you can look at it on your iPad, you can look at it on your Mac, and you're looking at exactly the same photos, and we'll see how that's done later. So let's talk about these two devices a little bit more. By the way, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask at any time. I'll be happy to answer questions. So, what is an iPhone or an iPad? Let's go a little more deeply into it. So first of all, it's an electronic device, and like everything else, it needs a power cable. And I won't go into any detail on this because I'm sure you know how to power up your, how to add electrical power to your device, how to plug it in and so forth. And I'll just tell you a few things that are, sort of behind the scenes. First of all, as you see in the top right-hand corner is your cable, and that's probably what you've got exactly like that for your phone or your tablet. And it's called a lightning connector. That's just the name. It's got nothing to do with lightning in the sky. It's Apple's name for their connector. And you'll see that it's got two ends. The one on the left is like a little square one, sort of rectangular, and it fits into the power plug, like the one in the bottom right-hand corner of that slide. And there's a slot on the side. You can see it there. It's on the right-hand side. And you can plug this little rectangular thing in. It's called a USB, a Universal Service Bus. And it doesn't matter what that means. The beauty of it is this is a standard connector. It fits into anything. Now, most other phones, all the other phones on the market other than Apple, on the other end, which would be in the right-hand side of that top picture, you have exactly the same connector as the iPad, as the USB, the big USB, which is, maybe half an inch across, quite big. It's just that it's smaller so that it can fit into the bottom of your iPhone, which wouldn't be able to take such a big connector. Apple decided to do their own thing, as they often do. And that connector in the top right-hand corner, if you look carefully, and if you look at your one, you can see it's not the same as the USB. It's their own connector. It has little silver connectors on both sides. If you look at it, little gold connectors on both sides. So it's a beautiful, high-quality device, and that end plugs into the bottom end of your phone where there's a gap for it, or into your iPad. And if you put the USB into a 2-pin plug, like is shown there, the power adapter, then you can plug it into a wall socket, and it will add electricity to your device. One asks, why did Apple go a different way to everybody else and not use the standard? And the answer to that is Apple did it because they can, right? And there's another reason I think they did it. If you buy a standard USB connector with a big one on the one end and a small USB on the other, which is what I use for all my other devices, it costs about $5 or less than $10, $5, $6. You can buy them at Kroger. But this one, like this, you can only really get from Apple. There are knockoffs that you can find, on Amazon and so on, but one doesn't know if they work or they're of the same quality. And the Apple one costs a lot more. So this little cable here costs about $30, whereas the ones that everybody else uses are so ubiquitous, there's so many of them, that they only cost about $5. One more point about powering your device. People are always, worrying. We have this anxiety now to have an electrical power because my phone says I've only got 10% left and I've got to get through the rest of the day. A good idea is put a cable, plug that cable in next to your bed. In fact, many lamps today, bedside lamps and clocks, my bedside clock, they've got a connector in the back, like that USB connection, like the one on the left side in the top picture. And you just plug it in, plug the other end into your phone or your iPad, and let it charge up while you're asleep. The people have said to me, well, it's going to finish charging in an hour or two, and then the rest of the night it's going to damage it. I just want to reassure you now that it's not like a pitcher of water. If you put a pitcher under the faucet and you forget to turn off the faucet, well, the water overflows and eventually may overflow onto the floor. The device is not like that. When it reaches 100% of charge, it automatically stops charging. So there's no damage to it. And like that, your device is always powered up for the day, and you will have much less anxiety. Apple is particularly good. Their batteries are particularly good. So unless you're watching lots of long movies, your power, if you charge it to 100% on your phone, will easily get through a normal day, sometimes 2 days, right? And it's also very good if you're not using the device. So if you're not using your device for a day or two, maybe you're traveling or working on something that you don't need your device for, it will usually maintain its power for several days, up to a week if you're not using it. And if you are using it, it will give you enough electrical power for somewhere between 1 and 3 days. The more you use it, obviously, the more electricity it uses. And particularly if you're doing things that are quite intensive on electrical power, like movies. Movies are classic. Games are the others. You probably don't. Certainly don't. You probably don't play these shoot-up games that the kids like. Those obviously use a lot of power too, because there's a lot of activity going on to make the moving pictures and so on. So that's really all we need to know about Apple Power. Now let's look at the device itself. So like I said before, the phone and the tablet are pretty much the same, but here's what happened. So when we take out our device and we power it on, so here's another thought. Most of these devices on the right-hand side or on the top, some versions have it on the top, some on the right-hand side, is the power on, power off button, where you can turn the device completely off, and then the same button will turn the device back on. My advice in general is don't bother ever to turn it off. You know, people often say, well, I turn it off at night and then I got to turn it back on in the morning. It's not worth the trouble. Just leave it on all the time, right? Unless, of course, you know, you're running out of power and you're going to be on an airplane or something for several hours and you want to conserve your power. It's once happened to me. I was flying to California and I'd forgotten to charge my phone up. And now I've got 5 hours on the plane and it's down to, you know, 15%. Well, it's going to run out. So what I would do then is just power it down, but mostly leave it running. Powering up and powering down is kind of like when you fly in a plane, the most dangerous times are takeoff and landing. The rest of the flight is nothing when you're up in the sky. Same here. The dangerous time when it could malfunction or damage or fail is power up, power down. That's, you know, kind of the takeoff and landing. So by and large, don't even bother to do that. Just leave the thing running. So in particular, you'll see, as you obviously know, it's quite clever, and it turns off the screen after 10 or 15 seconds. And the reason it does that, of course, is to conserve power, because showing these pretty pictures on the screen, although you don't realize that, it's refreshing the pictures. It's showing them again and again and again, many times a second, you know, maybe 10 times a second. It's refreshing the screen. You can't see it. Our eyes don't pick it up, but that's what it's doing to keep it nice and crisp and sharp. Otherwise, the image would sort of fail or fade after time. So that uses power, refreshing the screen all the time. And so if you haven't used the device or you haven't touched the screen in, for say 10 or 15 seconds or what, you can actually reset that time to whatever you like. You can make it 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or never, you know, never go off. But I wouldn't recommend that, because then you can run your battery down much more quickly. So the idea is that the screen goes dark to save the battery, and all you have to do is just press the power button one time, or in some versions of the phone, you just, you know, touch the button at the bottom, the home button, as which we'll see in a future screen, and it'll bring you back to this home screen. And so this screen that we're used to seeing with all these pretty little pictures on is called the home screen, and you'll see that that's actually quite an important phrase in a moment, right? So this is filled with these pictures. They're called icons. I'm not sure why they call them icons, because the real word icon means one of those statues of Jesus and Mary and so on, and the saints in a Catholic church. That's an icon. Why they call them icons, I don't know. But they really also become known as apps, or short for applications, application program. So each one of them represents an app, a piece of software that does something, right? And to make it do whatever it's supposed to do, all we have to do, as I'm sure you well know, is tap it gently, right? So the interesting thing about this screen, and I remember when I first saw the iPhone back in 2007, you know, my thought, like everybody else, is how do you use this darn thing? There's no keyboard, right? Well, that was the genius of this, that they came up with this idea of the screen, which we'll talk about in a future slide, that actually senses your finger. It knows where your finger is. And so by putting the icons, the app pictures in specific places, as you can see there, they are on the screen, and exactly, and tomorrow if you turn on the device or you come back to your device later, those pictures will stay in exactly the same place. They don't move around. So in that example there, in the bottom left-hand corner is a picture that looks like an old telephone. And that clearly is the phone to make phone calls. I always find it interesting, if you look, all of these icons always refer back to the old ways of doing things. So if you look at the phone, remember it's an old handset. You remember on the rotary dial or the push button phone, we had a handset like that. Well, we haven't had handsets like that for years, but that's the icon. If you look in the top right-hand corner, you see the icon for the camera. And what is that? It looks like one of those old cameras that we used to have, you know, when in the days when you bought a camera, right? Nobody buys those anymore except professionals, because you've got a better camera built into the phone. Or second from the left in the second row is a clock, right? And it says underneath it clock. But again, that's an old-fashioned, so to speak, clock with hands. The kids don't do that anymore. Your phone generally on the outside, you look at your phone, it's got the date and time, and the time will say, mine says right now, 1:23 p.m. It doesn't have hands anymore. But that's the icon. So isn't that strange that all the icons are the old icons, but that's the way it is. So if you click on that icon there, one in the top right-hand corner, you just touch it. It's equivalent to clicking your mouse on your laptop. So that's the only real difference between the laptop and the iPad or iPhone. iPad or iPhone, you just touch the icon, the app. On your laptop computer, you would usually click a mouse. But of course, most of the new computers, not Macs, funnily enough, but all other computers today, or Windows computers, have what they call touch screens. And so you can actually point at the screen and touch an icon on the screen, and that app will actually wake up and start working, whether it's Microsoft Word or whatever, or email or whatever. So that was the genius here, is that they came up with this special glass. So the screen is glass, and it's a special kind of glass with an interesting name called gorilla glass, like the animal, like a gorilla, which means A, it's very strong, like a gorilla, but more important is that there's electronic sensors right behind the glass that you can't see that can sense the electrical activity in your finger. So because of your nervous system, there's a tiny amount of electrical activity in our bodies, right, to power our heart and our brains and so forth. And that activity in your finger can be sensed. So when you put your finger perhaps 1/4 of an inch away from the screen, it knows that your finger is in the top right-hand corner and not in the bottom left-hand corner. It knows within a small radius, it knows exactly where your finger is. So you can point sort of anywhere in that icon, in that little picture, and then just touch the screen gently, and it detects that, you've touched the screen. Not only have you come close to it, but you actually touched the screen. And that's the instruction to iOS, our friendly operating system, iOS, to wake up and say, my owner wants to take a picture. I must open up the camera app. Or my owner would like to make a phone call, in which case I'm going to open up the phone app, and with a little dial pad that you can dial 404 whatever and call somebody, right? Or my owner wishes to open the email app, and it will open your email, and you can read your emails and type new emails and so forth. So that's the basis of this whole thing. It's very, very clever. Pretty much all the buttons went away. The only buttons that are left on your phone and your iPad, pretty much, is the power button on the right. Next to the power button, sometimes on the left, is the louder and softer buttons, either two separate buttons to make the sound louder, and the other one is to make it softer, or it's a single button. If you press it at the top, it makes it louder. The sound, whatever sound is coming out of the computer, out of the phone, makes it louder. And if you press it at the bottom of the switch, it goes softer. It's kind of like a rocker switch. So those are pretty much the only physical switches left on the device. And then on older versions of the iPhone and older versions of the iPad, there's a sort of a button down at the bottom. So if you can imagine on this one that I've got on the screen, you actually can see it in this little picture, but it's sort of below. You imagine it right at the bottom, just below the last line of 4 icons with the phone on the left. So just below it in the middle is another sort of button. It's a round button, and if you press it, that's called the home button, and that takes you home back to this home screen. So here I mentioned these. We've got the power on off button. We've got the volume button. Until recently, there was an earphone jack. So depending on what, if you've got an iPhone that's more than about a year or 2 old, if you look at the bottom, you'll see it has a tiny little round hole, quite small, and that takes a single pin called the earphone jack. So if you have one of those pairs of earphones with a cable, you plug it in there, and you can listen to the music or listen to a phone call where nobody else can hear what's being said. It'll transfer the sound only into the earphone. Today, of course, Apple has done away with the earphone jack, and they've replaced it with those earpods, those little white things hanging that you see hanging out of people's ears, which are connected to the phone wirelessly. Why did they do that? And again, Apple did it because they can. More important is that the old earphone, you can buy those earphones that give you really good sound for $20 or $30 easy. You can probably get them for 10 on some website, whereas the new earpods cost $160. So Apple overnight, basically by taking away the little tiny little hole, raised your cost from $20, $30. And in fact, the earphones usually came with the phone when you got it. So unless you lost it, came with the phone. These earpod things, you have to go buy them, and they are quite expensive. In addition, another work of genius of Apple was to put two cameras on the computer. So if you look at your phone or your iPad, you can always see the camera on the back, and that's facing away from you. So when you're looking at the screen, there's a camera on the back, and it's very clear. Some versions of have got two. You'll see two cameras, right? And I think the new ones are coming. I might even have three cameras, and then there's a camera on the side facing you, and that's usually quite hard to see. So if you look at the next slide, we'll see here that the forward-facing camera, the camera facing towards you, not outwards, is, if you look at the top arrow, you can just see there's a tiny little hole. It's barely visible right in the middle at the top. That's the camera facing you. And the big camera facing outward is the camera that will take pictures of, your family, or the mountains, or the White House, if you're visiting the White House, or whatever it is. It's a regular camera, right? So the question, of course, to ask is, why did Apple put two cameras on, or at least two, one facing forward and one facing backward? And that was also a remarkably clever piece of technology and marketing, is that the camera facing towards you allowed you to do something now that you actually could never do with the old cameras. The old cameras were pretty good, even the cheap ones. If you remember the old Kodak throwaway camera, you took photos with it, then you handed the whole camera back to somebody like Wolf Cameras, and they developed the pictures and threw the camera away, right? It was all one piece. There was one thing that you couldn't do with those cameras, and that was take a picture of yourself, right? You could try and turn it around, but it was not going to be very easy to do. So what they did introduce was a timer, where you could set a timer that would tick down for 10 seconds, and you could put the camera down somewhere, start the timer, and then run and get in the picture with your family. And after 10 seconds, it would go click and it would take the picture. You don't need that anymore, because you now actually have a camera facing towards you. And that actually had the interesting effect of creating a new word in the English language. And that word was the selfie, which is now in the dictionary. So you can take a photograph of yourself called a selfie, right? So here's our device again. You've got the camera at the top. You've got the touch screen. So that whole glass screen is the touch screen. Then a row of icons or row of apps. And then there's a special row of icons or apps, and that's on the bottom row. And the only difference between the bottom row and all the rest is that you'll see there's not a lot of space on your phone or your iPad for these apps. So in this picture here, there's 4 across and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows going down. So that's 5 times 4. You'd only have 20 apps, right? Which is quite a lot, but you'll find it's very easy to have more than 20 apps, because these things are so versatile. So what do you do if you've got more than 20 apps? Well, the answer is there's actually 1 or 2 or 3 more pages, depends on the version of the operating system you've got, sitting kind of in space just to the right of the screen. And so if you put your finger on the screen and you flip it to the left, kind of like you were turning the page in a newspaper or in a magazine, a new home screen will open up with more icons on. And like I say, I think there's either 2 or 3 of them. So you can get a whole lot more apps And the ones that you don't use very often, you would leave on the second screen or the third screen, right? And all you have to do is flip to the left. You flip your finger to the left, and you can try that on your phone. Or, and when you've done with that, you want to go back to the main home screen, you just flip your finger to the right. So it's like turning a magazine page left or right. The only difference then of those icons on the bottom is they stay. They don't move. So if you flip the page to the right, those 4 or 5 icons on the bottom will stay. And those are the ones that you tend to use the most often, the ones that you would always want to have in place. So that would typically be the phone, maybe your browser to go to the internet, maybe your email, whatever you want, right? So if you can see on this example here, it's got a messaging app on the left. Then the second one, it looks like a little compass, is Apple's browser called Safari. And the next one has got an envelope. Again, notice the old icon. Who writes letters anymore? But they've got the picture of the envelope, which indicates mail, or in this case, email. And then on the one on the right, it's got a music symbol. And that I would press that if I like to listen to music. I might press that button and it'll play my favorite songs. And then it's all hard to see, but right down at the bottom, the lowest red arrow, you can see is pointing to a little round sort of button on the bottom, and that is the home button. So that's kind of a button that's always there. And that's a very beautiful and clever idea too, very useful. Wherever you happen to be, anywhere on your computer, you don't know where the heck you are, you've got yourself lost completely, all you have to do is press the home button, and you're always back here at the home screen, at the first screen. And I always use the example that's, if you remember The Wizard of Oz, and Dorothy could just click her ruby slippers and she went home to Aunt Em in Kansas, right? She could go home instantly. Same here. You can instantly go home, which is not something we can always do. You know, we're driving our car on the interstate, or in the days when we did more driving, and you missed the exit, well, too bad. You know, you got to keep on going until you can get back. Here, no matter, and let's say you then get lost. Well, there was no button that you could press in the car that would take you back to your garage or your house, right? This button here does exactly that. It doesn't matter where you are, so you can never, in a sense, get lost. People say to me, well, I'm too scared to use this phone. I always get lost on it, and then I don't know what to do, and then I get frustrated. You don't have to do that. Just press the home button, and no matter where you were, doesn't matter what was going on, iOS will say, aha, you want to go back to the beginning, and the screen will open again, your famous home screen. Got that? Hello? Did you get that?
I did. I got that.
Is that okay? All make sense?
It's okay. The only thing I couldn't do, I was trying to move the icons to a separate page, like you were saying.
Yeah. Okay,
it moved the whole page.
I'm going to show you how to do that. Well, let me tell you how to do that right now. So that's in a future slide, but I'll tell you how to do it right now. So, you know, you would think you would just grab the icons and slide them around, sort of like, you know, tiles on a Scrabble board, but doesn't actually work like that for a good reason. If they were too easy to move, you would find yourself accidentally moving them all the time, right? You know, like when you play Scrabble, if you remember, and you got all the tiles, and you shake the board a little bit, the tiles all move, and then they're in the wrong place, and you know, you've got to reset the thing up. So they didn't want that. So you have to go through a special process to be able to move the icons. And the way you do that is instead of just tapping it, so just tapping the icon wakes it up. So if I tap the clock icon, the clock app will open up and tell me the time and a few other things that it can do to allow me to set an alarm for a particular time, or see what the time is in London or in California or whatever, in different time zones. But if you put your finger on that icon, any icon, doesn't matter which one, and you hold it there for a few seconds. Don't press too hard, you know, don't break the screen, although it's very, very strong. I tell you, it's like a gorilla. It's very strong like a gorilla. But you just hold it down gently for a couple of seconds, 1 or 2 seconds. It's very, very fast, right? Just a second or two. Suddenly, all the icons will start to jiggle. They'll jiggle up and down like they're doing a little dance. And when they start doing a little dance, that's the message to you to say, okay, they're all unlocked now. They're not locked in place anymore. And now you can put your finger on that clock icon and drag it down, say, to the bottom row. Notice our bottom row there, you know, above the regular, you know, the ones that we use often, there's a blank row. I could drag it down there, or I could drag it to a different row. I could drag it to between the music icon and the icon that's got the letter A on. I could drag it into that gap, and it would move everything else to the right, and it would move it into that position. Now, your question is, well, how do we get it to the right? And this one tends to be a little trickier. I don't know why, but all you really have to do is drag it to the right as if you're going to the next page, and drag it over the edge. And as you drag it over the edge, the next page will automatically open up, and you can put it on that page, or you can drag it to the edge again and put it onto the third page, right? So it tends to be a little tricky, and sometimes when you drag it over the edge, it drags it to the 2 pages on instead of the one you want. I don't know why. It takes a little practice, but that's all you have to do. And then when Apple, one strange thing with Apple, then if you finished moving your icons around, you need to stop them all jiggling, because they're all jumping up and down, and now none of them is reacting. So while they're jiggling up and down and doing their little dance, you can't click on anything anymore, because it's now waiting for you to move the icon. So when you finish moving your icons around, all you have to do is press the home button again, press it 1 time, and that'll stop jiggling, and now you can carry on. While they're jiggling as well, by the way, there's a little menu that opens up next to an icon, a little tiny menu. And one of the options in the menu is to delete that icon. So you'll see a little X, right? And if you press the X, that will delete the icon. It won't take away the app. The app is still in the computer, but it's just not going to take up any space on your home screen anymore, right? You can always get it back. I'll show you how to get it back later in a future session. But for right now, let's say, you know, I just don't use that icon at all anymore, right? I just never use it. Delete the icon, save the space, right? In most cases, you don't have to actually take the program out of the phone or the iPad. You've got so much space in there, you'll probably never fill it up. If you're in the unfortunate position of running out of space, and that's usually because we've got too many photographs and too many movies, then it might be worth taking unnecessary apps out completely and saving the space. But mostly, not at all, doesn't make any difference. So that's, yeah, if you try that, you should find that works. Hold it down, watch them all start to jiggle up and down. They all might do a little dance, and then put your finger on an icon, drag it to the right screen, to the right edge of the screen, and so to speak, drag it over, and the new second page will appear, and then you can put the icon wherever you like on that screen. You put it at the top, put it at the bottom, put it wherever you like. If
okay,
you wanted
that
to
works.
go in, I'm sorry,
it works.
say again. Did it work? Great, yay. If you want to put it into your favorites at the bottom, it's exactly the same. You press the icon, wait till they all jiggle, and then let's say I use the camera a lot. I could take the camera icon in the top right-hand corner and just drag it down to the bottom line. So if I dragged it down between Safari, which is that icon, that app that looks like a compass, and the email, which looks like a little envelope, if I dragged it into the gap in the middle, it would put it in where the email is. The email would move to the right, and the one that's got the music on would be kicked off, right? And that would move back up to the normal screen. So you've got place for 4 or 5 of these. Obviously, you've got more space on the iPad, and these are the ones that you use very often. So it doesn't matter which page you're on, the phone icon is always where you expect it to be. So usually I've got, you know, the phone icon in the bottom right-hand corner. I've got my email, and I've got my my calendar and my phone messages. I put all of those on the bottom row because those are things I do all the time. The rest I can go look for them, but I never have to look for those guys on the bottom because they're always there on the bottom. Okay, so let's move forward. So now we've got, with the iPhone and iPad on this very clever touch screen. There are a couple of things, I've already alluded to them, but I'll repeat that now, that we can do with our fingers. So one is, of course, you just touch an icon and it works. We call that a tap, right? So you gently press on a picture, on an icon, on an app, and that's equivalent to a mouse click on your laptop, and the app will wake up. The long press, hold it down, that's when they start jiggling, and then I can move them to a new place on the screen, or I can delete them entirely. The swipe I've also spoken about. You put your finger on the screen, you drag it to the left or to the right, and that allows you to see the missing pages. In fact, on your phone, you can also drag from the top down. And if you drag it, if you put it anywhere on the screen and drag down from the top of the screen downwards towards the bottom, that will open up some other functions that you might want to occasionally use. And we'll talk about those in a future session. Drag, well, we've spoken about drag. You now, once they're jiggling, you can now drag, you can pull the icon down and move it to a new place. And then the two more that are my favorites are what are called pinch and spread. So if you've got some kind of a picture on the screen, it could be something from Amazon.com, or it could be a photograph that's on your computer. Let's do spread first. If you put your two fingers together, your thumb and your first finger together onto the screen, and then open them up, right, spreading them out, it'll make the picture bigger. And the opposite is, if you start with your fingers apart, your thumb and your forefinger, and drag them together, it will make the picture smaller. So it's very, very useful thing, to sometimes read things that are not clear on the screen. You can use this pinch and spread. He has a useful idea. It just shows, this is such a powerful device. You can use it in ways it sort of wasn't designed for. I don't know about you, but I've got a few medications I take, and you got a pill box and it's got a little label on, and if you can read the label, your eyes are better than mine. Good luck, right? But one has to read the label. I can't remember, should I take this once a day or 3 times a day? It's going to make a bit of a difference. So when you've got little things like that are very hard to read, or sometimes you're looking at a page on the internet, or even a page in the newspaper. If you've got a newspaper or a magazine, sometimes under a picture, they put some text, more details about the picture, and it's often in very small type. Well, here's an idea. Turn on the camera, hit your camera app, focus it on the pillbox, right? Or that picture in the newspaper or the magazine, and then spread your fingers and it makes it bigger. Now you can easily read the information on the side of a can of peas or something. If you wanted to read it, it's, if you wanted on the side of cans of stuff, they've got all the nutrition details, but it's quite small and it's often hard to read. Read it with ease. Read the information on your pillbox. Read the information on say in the newspapers, that pretty small print. Really, really useful idea, right? You can make it bigger and then make it smaller again. Kind of useful. I actually do that all the time. So your camera can become a very useful thing. Another idea I've seen people use the camera for, I watched some teenagers do it the first time, is they looked into the camera facing back towards them, and you can use it as a mirror now. Watch the girls doing their hair, straightening their hair out, you're checking their makeup and stuff. You don't need a mirror anymore because the camera now is focusing on your face and you can see it. And if you want it to be a little bigger, you can make the picture bigger or smaller as well. So these are useful ideas that you can do with the camera. I also use the camera not so much anymore, but for obvious reasons. But I used to do a lot of traveling, and so I'd often be at another city, like I'm in San Francisco. I've rented a car. I drive to my client to park the car, come out at 5 o'clock. I can't remember where I parked the car, and B, I don't even remember what it looks like, what kind of car, because I just rented it. It could be a Chevy, it could be a Ford, who knows? I don't even remember what color it was. So what I have, having spent a few times fruitlessly walking around a parking lot trying to find my car, I would take a picture of the car. just park the car, and you can do that at Kroger's or whatever as well. If you in some unfamiliar parking lot, you take a picture with a camera, and then later on when I come back, I see, it's a green Chevy and the tag number is ABC1234, and usually I'll find it easily. Or even particularly when I used to park at Atlanta Airport, the parking deck is gigantic. So I would take a picture of where it is. It's in slot C123, right? And I would always find my car, just, at which stage you delete the photo and you don't need it anymore. So very useful. So we know when we start up, generally you get this screen, which you can see on the right, which is called the login screen. And Apple requires you to have a 4-digit PIN, a personal identification number is what PIN stands for, right? And you should always have a PIN, and you should not use, numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, that are easy to remember. Because if it's very easy for you to remember, it's also easy for me to find out. And I could then get into your phone or your iPad and see private information. So have a good PIN, 6498 I've got there, but something that's meaningful to you. Don't use your phone number. I remember when we were still open at Benson and we're having in-person sessions, the guy couldn't get into his device. And I asked him what his phone number was, and it was 404, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I used the last 4 digits, and sure enough, that opened his device. Not a good idea. So try and choose something that nobody else will be able to guess. But notice the big warning at the bottom: don't forget the PIN. Even Apple can't get it back for you. So if you call Apple and you say, I can't remember my PIN, I don't remember it. I've tried 1672 and 2195, which is my usual numbers, and neither of them worked. So I've forgotten the number. Believe it or not, Apple can't help you, right? All they can do is reset the device, what they call back to factory settings, how the device was when you first got it, which would wipe out all your photographs and all your emails and everything, which you may have to do, but is not good. If you've got a lot of personal photographs and emails and stuff, they potentially would all be gone. So do not forget the PIN. Now, believe it or not, you can turn off this PIN, but I would generally recommend against that, because if you leave your phone and go to the bathroom or go for lunch or something, and I'm a nosy guy and I see your phone lying around, I might try and get into it so I can, maybe I can find out your credit card number or something like that. Better to have a PIN when you come back from lunch. You key the PIN in, and it starts up. Or if you accidentally, left the phone on a plane or something, or at a friend's house, nobody can get into it without that PIN. So good idea to use the PIN. Apple has also now come out with some options where you can actually use your fingerprint, but you can put your finger on the home button and you can train it. So you go through a little training process, which takes a few minutes, and it will know your fingerprint. And then there's an option as well, if you wish it will learn your face. And so you look into the camera a few times and you look, slightly to the right, slightly to the left, and so on. Once it knows your particular face, all you do is look in the camera and the phone will open up, or the iPad will open up. But if I try, of course, it won't open up because our faces look different. Okay, so let's look at some of the useful icons, the ones that you may find valuable. So the first one I want to talk about is this one in the top right-hand corner. Kind of looks like a gear wheel, and they call it the settings button. And that's the stupidest name I think they could possibly have thought of. I don't know what settings mean. What's setting? In actual fact, that's the iOS button. So when you press that button, that thing that looks like a gear wheel, and usually I put that on the second screen rather than on my home screen, because I'm not going to use it all the time. You'll use the settings just occasionally, and we're going to talk about that. But when you need it, you need it. So it's good to know what you can do with the settings button. So it really should be called the iOS button. This is the way you talk to Apple itself, to the phone, and say, I want you to change some things, right? I want you to make this thing more the way I want. Kind of like, repainting your room from you know, white to cream. You're resetting things to be the way you want. And so when you press the settings button, you get a screen looking something like what I've got there. Now that's on the iPad because it's got enough space. If you're just on the iPhone, there isn't enough space for that. So you will just see the left column, the one that's headed settings on the left. And then when you press any one of the settings, what's on the right column here will then open up on your phone. Now, Apple has a bad habit of changing the order of these settings. So sometimes a new version of the phone comes out and it doesn't look like this anymore. They've moved what was number 2 to number 5 and what was number 5 to number 3 and so on. Why they do that, I have no idea, because, you know, I don't want them to change the way the gears work in my car. You know, that I'm used to the fact of how it goes 1, 2, 3. You know, I don't want them to change it. I don't want them to move the pedals to the back seat. That's not a good idea, right? But Apple has this tendency that if it ain't broke, they got to fix it. So all of these buttons will be on your phone or your iPad. They may not be in exactly the same order, right? But they will be there. So again, notice the difference. On your iPhone, if you press settings, you'll see that left button, that left column with all the settings on. On your iPad, which has got more space, you'll see both columns. And you can go up and down that settings column. It's kind of like a Chinese menu or a menu at a Chinese restaurant, excuse me. There are all these items on the menu. And then if you look at the item more carefully on the menu, it'll tell you all the ingredients, what's specific about that item, right? And each entry on the menu will have a different set of ingredients. Same here. You can see that the blue line, which is the one that is being selected, is on general. And so on the right is all what they call the general stuff. You'll see the column is now headed general. And it's stuff that they couldn't categorize in any other way. And I'll talk about those in a moment. So let's start on the left at the top. The first one is airplane mode. Don't bother with that. That was always the biggest load of junk, right? They always tell you, you know, put your phone on airplane mode when you get on the plane, because otherwise it's going to interfere with the aircraft's computers. Baloney, right? If there was any chance that my phone could affect the aircraft's computers and the plane was going to crash, they wouldn't allow me to bring it on a plane, or you would have to hand your phone in as you came in the door, which you never did. So it was always baloney. I never understood why they did it. And our phones have now got this airplane mode thing. Just forget about it, right? The second one is the useful one. It says Wi-Fi, right? And Wi-Fi, of course, is the way we get onto the internet. And if you press that button, if you pressed Wi-Fi, then on the right, you would see a list of all the available Wi-Fis. And there may be more than one. You know, you may have the Wi-Fi in your apartment, and it may see the Wi-Fi of the apartment below or next to you, or the guy across the road. These Wi-Fis are quite powerful. Sometimes, you know, you may see 10 of them. You know, the Starbucks, you know, half a block down from you, they got Wi-Fi, and you may be seeing their Wi-Fi as well. So you would choose the one you want, you would click on it. If it was a Starbucks, the Wi-Fi would just start working. But if you were at Benson, or you came to my house, or I came to your house, the probability is that it's not an open Wi-Fi. It needs a password, and you would have to key in the appropriate password. And that's the way we keep freeloaders out. You know, if I spend the money, the monthly, you know, $30 or whatever it is to $40 to, you know, with AT&T or Verizon or whoever to have my Wi-Fi, I don't want some freeloader sitting in the street outside, you know, surfing the web or playing games or whatever he wants to do on my nickel, right? So we put in a password, and that means nobody else can get into your Wi-Fi. So typically when you get your Wi-Fi from AT&T or Verizon, whoever, there will be a password associated with it. Starbucks, for example, because they just want everybody to use their Wi-Fi, it's free. In fact, that's a brilliant idea that Starbucks had way back at the beginning. I could not understand in the early days, why would a coffee shop give me free Wi-Fi? Until, of course, you realize they were crazy like a fox, because if I'm using the Wi-Fi, I'm probably sitting in the Starbucks. And while I'm sitting in the Starbucks, the likelihood is I'm going to drink coffee. And so it increased their sales. Apparently, just by providing the Wi-Fi, their sales went up, you know, 20% or something. It's a very clever idea. Okay, so that's the Wi-Fi. The next one down, the third one on the left says Bluetooth, right? And it says next to it on. So Bluetooth is a strange animal. It's a kind of Wi-Fi as well. In other words, a wireless connection, but it only works over very short ranges. So the Wi-Fi, like I said, you might sense the Wi-Fi of the guy across the road. Could be 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet away, right? Could be 100 yards away, depending how strong their signal is. But Bluetooth is designed to be exactly the opposite, very short range, maybe a foot or two, no more than 3 feet. And that would be used for devices that are personal. So if you have those AirPods that go into your ears, well, how does it connect to your phone? It connects by Bluetooth, short range Wi-Fi, and it might need a password as well so that I can listen into the sound that's coming into your earphone. Most cars today, when you get into the car, if I get into my car, the car instantly senses my phone and connects to it. And now I can make phone calls, for example, using the car's radio, which has got a better microphone and a better quality speaker and so forth, right? But if I get out of the car and I go stand, at the back next to the trunk, it won't see it at all, right? Because I'm too far away. You actually would have to be, so to speak, in the driver's seat, and then the sensor is just a foot or two away from you in the dashboard. So why there are two technologies, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, why they couldn't have just one, I don't know, but they are essentially the same thing. But one is Wi-Fi wide area, right? And the other one is, they call it Bluetooth, which is a strange name, but it's a short range Wi-Fi. Down below is VPN. Don't worry about that. That's for security thing. But I just want to show you next to the VPN, you can see on the right side of it, is a little thing that's got a circle and it says off. And that's a switch. So that's Apple's version of a switch. Turn the switch on or off, it's now in off state, and the little circle is grayed out, so to speak. If you put your finger on that little circle and drag it to the right, hold it down and drag it to the right, it will change color, as you will see down in the bottom right-hand corner, where it says iPad cover lock. And you can see now the little circle's on the right, and it's blue now, a different color, and it says on. If I wanted to turn off that switch, I would put my finger on the little circle again and drag it to the left. So it's kind of like a switch that to turn your lights on and off. It goes this way or it goes that way. One way's on, one way's off. The only other one that's really important, that I think most of these are not important, is the one just above the blue bar that says general on the left, and that is notifications. Notifications, if you click on that, will show you, notifications means, are apps allowed to notify me that they have a message? So for example, if an email comes in, the email is set up to go bing if there's an email, right? And if there's a text message, that's set up to go bong, with a different sound and so on. Well, if you leave them all on, it'll drive you nuts, yeah? Every time an email comes in, and of course, many emails we get today are junk mail, spam, you'll be going bing, 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 and wake you up at night. Messages too, So when you click on notifications, it will show you all your apps, a whole lot of them, phone, messaging, etc., and you can turn them all off. So what I do is I turn them all off. There's one button at the top that says turn them all off. I don't want to be woken up by anybody, and then selectively turn on the ones you want. So let's say text messaging. I do want to know when text messages come in. That's important to me for whatever reason. Maybe I got a sick relative and I need to know when they're texting me, or in business, I want to know when my boss is texting me, whatever. Turn that one back on. And so now 1 or 2 or 3 apps are allowed to notify you. I think on mine, I've probably got no more than 3, maybe less, because otherwise it just drives you crazy. Below that one, below the blue general, there's one called sounds, if you can see that. Again, remember the order may be different on your particular device, but they're all there in some order. So sounds is very useful too. That allows you to customize the sounds that your phone makes. So when it rings, when the phone rings, you can have one tune play. But when something else happens, you can have a different tune play, right? You can have, let's say I'm using WhatsApp. We'll talk about WhatsApp later. But if I get a WhatsApp phone call, it plays a different sound to when the phone goes. And the standard thing, the way the phone is set up is it just rings, ring, 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 like an old phone. But you can change it to anything you like. So if you press that sounds button, it will say, what sound do you want me to play when the phone rings? And it'll give you about 60 different tunes. You can try them all out. So when I get a new phone, I go through it. I play the first one, I play the second one until I get one that I like. Or just leave it on, the original. Doesn't make any difference. But technically, you can even create your own sounds. You can download a piece of music that you like, and if you want the Beatles, I want to hold your hand or something as your phone, you can perfectly do that, right? I've got some classical music. I like classical music that it plays, when my phone rings. It means that I always know it's my phone ringing. And if, I'm standing with a few other people, everybody jumps for their phone when it rings. I don't do that because I know exactly what the sound is that my phone makes. So again, that's kind of useful, not essential. And then there's a whole bunch of other things there, which I'm really not going to go into. We could be here till kingdom come, going through all the options. Those are pretty much the only ones that you are going to want to talk to the operating system about. Mostly, the only time you'll ever come to the settings button is to change the Wi-Fi. So if we go back to Benson now, when Benson opens up again, hopefully, in the not too distant future, you may have to reset how you can connect to the Benson Wi-Fi. Or if you came to my house, I would have to let you onto my Wi-Fi and give you the password. That's when you use it. The other ones like sounds and notifications, you probably use once. Once you've set it up, the sounds, I like that tune. That's it. You never have to do it again. So very, very few of these will you use on regularly other than the Wi-Fi. And if, these days we're not going anywhere, we stay in our house, you don't need to even use the Wi-Fi because the Wi-Fi is always connected. It will always connect to your Wi-Fi. But, if something goes wrong and it kind of forgets your Wi-Fi, this is the way to get back on and or let's say you can connect to a website. Go to the settings, check the Wi-Fi, and see if it will tell you if you're connected. Are you connected to the Wi-Fi? Maybe something's gone wrong, something happened, and you're no longer connected to the Wi-Fi. So that's the first test you can often do if you can't get to Amazon.com or CNN.com or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Is check that the Wi-Fi is connected, and if it isn't, when you press this button, you can reconnect to the Wi-Fi. And the good news is Apple, the iOS, will remember the password. So even though you haven't been to Benson for 6 months, if you were there and you connected to the Benson Wi-Fi, if you went back to Benson tomorrow, it would as long as they haven't changed the password, it will instantly connect to the Wi-Fi again. It will remember it. But if you went back to Benson and it won't connect, it probably means they've changed the password and they've got to give you the new password. So I think I'll stop at that point. That's probably a lot. I'm sorry I've sort of overloaded you, but I'm trying to get as much as possible useful to you. We're more or less finished with the device now. Next time we'll start looking at some of the apps and the useful things that you can do with it. Any questions?
I do have a question under settings, cellular data. When do we use cellular data?
Well, cellular, that's a good question. Not only are there 2 ways of Wi-Fi, I told you, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, there are actually 3. The third one is the oldest one, which is the cellular network, the phone system, and the cellular phones have been around since, I don't know, the 80s, right? That we've had cell phones. And it's called cellular because if you see those towers around, they're AT&T towers and Verizon tower, they're either you can see it as a tower or it's kind of disguised to look like a tree or something, or it's on the top of a building. That is transmitting the cellular signal, the telephone signal, which why it doesn't just use Wi-Fi, I don't know, but it's an old technology and it's still there. Now, what they've allowed us to do is if you are not on Wi-Fi, let's say you don't have Wi-Fi, you may be in your car, let's say there's no Wi-Fi, you're driving along, but your car automatically is connecting, I mean, your phone automatically is connecting to the cellular towers. You can use the cellular tower to transmit the data, right? So you could actually surf the web. Which is great. The only disadvantage of that is that your Verizon or your AT&T or your T-Mobile, whoever you got your phone service from, they give you a limit of how much data you can use. And that's not very big. It used to be, seem like a gigantic amount, 5 gigabytes or something. But today, if you watch a movie, that's it. You'll use that up pretty quickly, right? So what happens at the end of that, at the end of the 5 megabytes is they then start charging you, right? You may get a $10 charge that comes on your phone, or worse. I was in Ireland a couple of years ago, and I bought a package from AT&T that I could use my American phone in Ireland. Well, I didn't realize that literally on the way to the airport coming home, the last few hours, it ran out of whatever amount of data they gave me, and I didn't notice it. They didn't give me a message or anything. And so that last few hours, just driving to the airport and surfing the web or something, I got like a $200 bill. So they're pretty good on that of whacking you with charges. I called them up, and eventually they reduced it to $10 or something. But it was a huge amount, $185 or something like that, just because I had overrun the limit. So cellular is a great idea. It means you can still, go to Amazon or go to the New York Times or CNN or Fox News or whatever it is that you want to go to, even though you don't have Wi-Fi on. Or let's say the Wi-Fi in your house is broken down and you're waiting for the repair guy and they're not coming till tomorrow. You're not stuck anymore, right? We've got to have the internet these days where we're kind of all bound to it. You could still do your internet stuff using cellular data. So generally you want that on, right? Because you may need it, but you need to be careful that you don't get whacked with a big charge by Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile. They're all the same. It's kind of a predatory thing. If they don't charge you a lot of money, what they may also do if you overrun is they start slowing you down. And you'll suddenly find that Amazon gets very slow. They slow you down. They put you in the back of the line, right? And which is not good. So I like to have it there as a backup, but I try not to use it too often because otherwise it might show up on your bill and you're going to get a surprise.
So you leave it on all the time?
Yeah, I would leave it on. But if you find that, hey, I'm using it too often and I'm running out of bytes, out of memory space for that, storage space, and I got a $40 charge on my bill, then turn it off, right? And turn it on when you need it. So you can do that too. I tend to just leave it on, right? But I'm careful, that if I'm not on Wi-Fi, I'm sitting in my car somewhere on the interstate, you haven't got Wi-Fi, don't be watching movies, if you know what I mean, right?
So it automatically switches on its own?
Yeah, it switches automatically, which is great. It means that you can continue, you can send text, you can be in your car or on an airplane, well, not an airplane because that's in the sky, but you could be on your car or on a train and you can continue to send text messages to your kids or your family, right? Even though there's no Wi-Fi, right?
Okay.
So let's say I'm in my car and I'm driving to New York and I'm on the 75 or the 85 or whatever, and I'm going to be on this road for 8 hours. There's no Wi-Fi, right? No Wi-Fi in the average car, but your phone is connecting to all the cell towers between here and New York as you drive along, and so you would be able to read the news and shop and whatever it is you want, but you would be using up time. They give you. And you would just need to be careful. So, if you did a lot of, surfing, Amazon and what have you, between here and New York in your car, if you were driving to New York, which we're not doing anymore, but if you were, you would probably get whacked with $100, $200 charge by the time you got there because you've used up all your cellular data. Of course, if you need to do that, as I did when I went to England, you can buy more data from AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile, whoever's giving you your cell phone. And that's usually a lot cheaper. So when I went to Ireland and I mostly couldn't get on the local Wi-Fi, I was using cellular data, but I just bought a package and I don't know, it was $50 or something. And I was going to be there a week. It allowed me to use my phone unlimited for a week. But like I say, they caught me because it ran out literally an hour or two before I left the country. But that was enough for them to ring up a nice fat bill. So you just need to be careful with that. But other than that, it's a great feature because it switches seamlessly from the one to the other. You won't even notice it.
And the same with roaming. Should the cellular roaming data option be on or off?
That should be on, but be careful. Roaming used to mean, you were in a different city and you'd start paying higher rates. Those days are gone. So your Wi-Fi that you bought from AT&T, say in Atlanta, will work in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles. But if you cross the border into Canada or Mexico or another country, that's when the costs go through the roof, right? So it's good to have roaming on, but if you're not traveling out of the country, then you don't need it, right?
Okay.
But it once happened to me. I'll tell you one more story and then we're done. I flew to Detroit and suddenly I got a message on my phone saying, you're now paying roaming charges, you're in Canada. What? I didn't know that Detroit had left the United States and gone to Canada. Well, it turned out that what happens when the plane comes in to land at Detroit, it temporarily crosses the border, at 20,000 feet as it turns back to land in Detroit. And that just crossing the border was enough for them to sense that I was in Canada, even though I was only in Canada for probably, 30 seconds or something, however long the pilot was over the Canadian border. And so they turned on roaming. And, luckily I knew about this. And as soon as I got to my hotel, I turned them. So I called them and they said, yeah, our computer says you're in Canada. I remember saying, well, I didn't know that Detroit was part of Canada. I always thought it was part of the United States. And then they agreed, and they unsaid it. But otherwise I would have been paying roaming rates. And that's where you can be paying anywhere between 50 cents and $1 a minute, right? So your ordinary phone calls now are at roaming rates. And that's why it would not be smart to go to another country. And, say you went to England or I went to Ireland, it would not be smart to be using your phone without first, so to speak, clearing it with your telco. Because the phone will work in Ireland or in England. It'll work great, but you're going to be paying 50 cents or $1 a minute. And so, if you make a whole bunch of phone calls while you're there, you may get a rude surprise when you get back home.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I will see you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Have a good week.
Most important, stay healthy.
Okay, thanks. Same to you and be safe.
Bye.
Bye.